Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the historic Naugatuck train station. Tonight we have a program that is centered on economic development. It is sponsored by the Borough of Naugatuck and the Naugatuck Economic Development Corporation, which is a public-private partnership formed about 10 years ago now to promote economic development in a bipartisan and professional manner, very similar to its model down in Shelton, the Shelton Economic Development Corporation. My name is Bob Mezzo. I'm the mayor of the borough, and I am very honored to welcome all of you here. Economic development is a topic that affects all of our lives. I think we engage in a wide variety of conversation about it, particularly when there is a business coming, a business going, a business growing, or turmoil in the economy that we've all experienced over the past 4 or 5 years. But behind what happens in our lives, what happens to our business community, where we shop, where we work, are a lot of theory, a lot of myths, quite frankly, and some realities that some of our panel will talk about. We've had tremendous opportunity here in the Borough of Naugatuck, strategically positioned where we are in New England between Boston and New York. We have a strong history of manufacturing. We have access to Route 8, which leads us to 95 and 84, a river, and an active rail line, which hopefully will not interrupt our program this evening. But we also face challenges. We face challenges on a local level. We face challenges on the state level and as well as national and global economy that impacts all of us. So tonight's program is designed to just share some thoughts about that from some people who've been in this business for a long time. And then to open this forum up to you for questions and answers, discussions. We encourage our community to engage themselves in this process. It's something that we may not have all the control over, but there's certain things that we can do to encourage growth in the private sector. I always say that the public sector doesn't create jobs. That is done in this country by the private sector. However, there are conditions that we can create and long-term plans we can make that can assist us. Few people deserve some thanks. I'd like to first thank the Historical Society for loaning their facility to us. They share a proud passion for the history of the borough, as you can see throughout this room, and we're grateful for having this facility to host this forum. I'd also like to thank Dave Prendergast as one of the speakers, he and the Naugatuck Economic Development Corporation for sponsoring this event. We have Chief Hanks who volunteered to film this, so for those who can't attend this evening, we will put this on the borough's website and provide a link to it. And we also have our friend Mark Weissman, who is a local cable access host, filming this as well, so this will go out to his family of viewers on Comcast as well. His show is called Looking Up, View for the Valley, which also is linked online and various social media. Our panel tonight is an esteemed group. To my immediate left is Mark Waterhouse. Mark is president of Garnett Consulting and has been before us on many occasions, particularly with some elected official and appointed official training that he did most recently a couple of years ago. Mark, thanks for being with us this evening. We also have Dave Prendergast, as I mentioned. He is the president and CEO of the Naugatuck Economic Development Corporation. And to Dave's left, to your right, is the famous Tom Hill, one of the most successful commercial realtors in this valley here. Tom is also the listing agent for properties in the Naugatuck Industrial Park. He is a valuable resource to us, a good friend, and someone we call on many times to let us know what's happening in the world of commercial and industrial development. He also is a radio DJ host. You didn't know that about Tom. His show is on WATR 1320 AM on Saturday mornings at
Saturday noon to 2.
Noon to 2.
It's the first time I've been called esteemed.
1320 AM, 12 noon to 2 PM. That's also available online. So I've talked enough. We have a great program. And again, the most important part of this tonight is the engagement with the public and the members of the community. Jake Carlson is the chairperson of the Naugatuck Economic Development Corporation, and he will host and moderate the question and answer forum at the end of the presentation. So Jay, thank you also for being with us. With that, first off is Mark Waterhouse, Garnett Consulting. We love Garnett here in the borough of Naugatuck, our official color, and Mark, we welcome you and turn the mic over.
Thank you, Mayor. In fact, if possible, can you hear me all right? If I don't use the microphone, I come from a long line of town criers. So that's usually not a problem. And even though my genealogy doesn't mention anything about Italians in my family tree, I got the rest of Europe covered. I got to talk with my hands. So I'm going to have a microphone in one hand and a remote in the other hand. I'm going to be in trouble. What I was asked to talk to you tonight about were some of the myths and realities of the economic development business in today's economy, which is much, much different, as I'm sure you all know, from the economy we were used to 10 years ago or farther back, and some myths and realities perhaps of what economic development may look like in a future economy that doesn't exist yet, so that we don't really have a clear picture of what that's going to be. So, we're talking about economic development. That raises the question of why should Naugatuck, why should any place be interested in having an economic development program? Why should you invest time and resources in an economic development program? There are three primary motivations for communities that do that. First and foremost, for most of them, it has to do with attracting capital investment, attracting business investment, because that usually translates into more taxes being paid by businesses and less taxes being paid by homeowners, and that's the kind of situation that all of us, no matter where we live, would like to have. Coming in a close second is something to do with employment opportunities. More jobs, better jobs measured in terms of wages or benefits, jobs closer to home so we don't have to commute 30 minutes, 40 minutes at $3.90-some-odd a gallon gasoline these days. So we cut down the commute time by having more jobs and good jobs in town. Third motivation is so that you don't have to drive 30 miles to go get your loaf of bread or go visit your doctor. Conveniently available goods and services. Those are the three most common motivations for having an economic development program, and then different communities may have other specific motivations that are important to them but are case specific for those communities. So those that are somewhere across that spectrum will be why Naugatuck is investing in having an economic development program. Well, we're using the term economic development. What does that mean? It means different things depending on who you talk to. If we're talking to communities, it is attracting businesses so that we have that investment and we have the jobs that come along with that investment. But that's not why businesses look at economic development. Businesses look at it in terms of finding a good location from which to operate. And it doesn't matter whether it's a manufacturing business, a service business, an office business, they're all looking for a good location. How do they measure good? It's a simple equation. How much can they sell from the location, minus what it's going to cost them to do business in that location, with a bottom line of what do you got left over, and is it adequate to justify that location as a good location. And that doesn't mean the absolute most sales or the absolute lowest costs. It means best location in terms of sales less costs equals revenue, and you can win even though you may not be the best in either of the first two lines. How do you do it? Runs across the spectrum of 5 different things related to business. The top 2, retention and expansion, dealing with what you already have in town, hopefully keeping them, and even better, having them grow. And then secondly, getting something new, business creation, that's the entrepreneurship program. If you look at the statistics currently out from the Kauffman Foundation, the Kauffman Index of Entrepreneurial Activity, there is 1 new business being created every year for every 47 people in the country. Now, these aren't full-time businesses. These go down to as small as 12 hours a week, where you may decide to create a business making cards or making salsa or something which you're spending 12 hours or more doing. Your business creation. We tend to lose sight of that because of the failure rate of small businesses, and you shouldn't do that. One of my favorite stories is when I was the community development director down in Milford, and I had one of my local developers come in with a young businessman in tow, and the developer said, "Mark, I need your help. This guy's got a little food service business. He's working out of the spare bedroom in his mother's house. He's up to 7 locations. He wants to rent 5,000 square feet from me in my new office building down on the end of High Street, and I need to fast track getting him a certificate of occupancy." The young businessman he had with him, who had 7 locations at the time, was Fred DeLuca. You familiar with Fred DeLuca? Founder and current owner, CEO of Subway. Now has 36,000 locations worldwide and is still headquartered in Milford, Connecticut. So you need to pay attention to those small businesses. Business attraction, that's the big sexy one where we see the announcements in the paper with a new business coming into town and occupying so many square feet of space and employing so many people. That's important, but it's these guys, the retention and expansion or business creation, that typically account for about 75% of the new business activity in any community, measured in terms of capital investment or business creation. The business attraction gets a lot of notoriety, and it's certainly important for growing your economy, but it is much less frequent an occurrence, and we'll look at some statistics to look at that. And then the final way to do economic development is assisting your businesses in transitioning from how they're doing things now to how they need to do things in the future. And that may be we're going to lean manufacturing, or it may be going to automation, or it may be going to different facilities or different product lines, lots of different forms of business transition that are important as a component of your economic development program. Different way of looking at how you do it. There are typically 10 major functions of a full-service economic development program. We use the acronym EDO. That stands for either Economic Development Organization, like NEDC, or Economic Development Operation, because it's not necessary for one organization to do all 10 of these things. But all 10 of them need to be done by someone. You know, research, information, that is the absolute currency of the economic development business. That's what we provide to help business prospects. And marketing and promotions, getting the word out, and you see the whole list. The one that typically does not get done by the frontline economic development group is your training and human resource building. That's done by the companies, that's done by your workforce investment board. There's somebody else that's got that as a primary responsibility. Most every local or regional economic development program is somehow involved in providing assistance related to site location. Usually that's just having an inventory of available space, but you're beyond that, because not only do you have that inventory, you're actually, NEDC is actually the creator of some of that space, and you see the rest of the functions that are important for a full-service economic development program. And by the way, if anyone has got any questions now, as I go, rather than wait until the Q&A session, please feel free to ask the questions now. What is it that you're selling? What is Naugatuck selling on the economic development marketplace? Any thoughts?
Location, manpower.
I'm not asking you, I'm asking them. You got to take my course 4 times before I pass it. What are you selling? What you're selling is place. You are selling quality of place. The higher quality place Naugatuck can be, the more competitive you will be. So how do businesses evaluate that quality of place? They look at these categories, a dozen. These can get sliced and diced. The International Economic Development Council has got a site standards database, 26 different screens with about 1,300 data points, all of which fit into these major categories. Business has got to know where their customers are, and is it convenient to reach them from here. A lot of that has to do with transportation, but some of it has to do these days with telecommunications, and they need to know about workforce, number of people in the labor shed, typically measured as a 30-minute commute time, although that used to be 45 minutes, so that's shrinking as gas prices have gone up, and skills and wages and so on and so forth. And you see all of these categories that you get measured on, and we will talk a little bit about some of these, but not all of these. What are the factors that are most important? The ones that you hit almost 100% of the time. These I get from my site location consultant friends, site selection friends, the Wadley Donovans and the Fantases and the businesses that concentrate on working with companies under contract to help them find a new location. First and foremost is labor, that we talked about already. If you can't get the right number of the right skills at a reasonable cost, you're out of the game. Okay? Secondly is real estate, the thing that makes Tom happy. Rapidly available buildings and sites. You know, there are some communities, particularly out in the Midwest, that put a sign in the corner of their favorite cornfield that says industrial park coming soon, and figure they have the real estate question taken care of. It's got to be a lot more rapid than that. Third, I said, information is the currency of this business. You have to be able to customize the data that's available. Old school way of doing this was we had what I call the forklift report. There's a ragu spaghetti that it says it's in there. That's what the old data books were about. You put down in writing everything you could possibly think of about your community, and you may update it and reprint it once a year, and it was about that thick, and you gave it to people, and they were supposed to go find the information that they wanted. That worked when the time frame was a lot longer than it is now that companies have available. Also, many of those things that they look at back on the prior screen are not looked at community specific. They're looked at in terms of the region you're part of. You know, the labor force that a company in Naugatuck will employ won't all come from Naugatuck, because you can draw from Waterbury, you can draw from Bridgeport, you can draw from a lot of places. So regional information, and be able to package it and get it out as an answer to an inquiry, a request for information in a short period of time. Having an effective local team that is also a part of an effective regional team is important. And last but certainly not least, your willingness to put on your Monty Hall hat and play Let's Make a Deal, which gets us into the whole topic of incentives and whether or not they're important. Yes, they are. That's why it's on this list. Incentives vary in importance. In the initial portion of a site search, there was a survey done of both NACOR members, way back when NACOR existed, the National Association of Corporate Real Estate Executives, and the American Economic Development Council, now the International Economic Development Council. And both groups were asked to prioritize 17 factors related to picking a site. And both groups ranked incentives number 14 out of 17 at the beginning of the process. Both groups also said when you get down to the last handful of finalist communities that may be pretty much even in terms of labor availability and site availability and utilities and all those things were evaluated, and incentives go right to the top of the list as a tiebreaker. So you need to have some kinds of incentives in your toolbox to be able to use in appropriate occasions. Yes, sir?
If I could ask, where do you see the people or the residents of the community fitting into all that? In other words, like Naugatuck, like a lot of mountain communities, a lot of ethnic diversity.
Yep.
How does that fit in as opposed to just looking at a business, population?
Yeah, I mean, the people are the labor force, for starters, so that's where you're going to draw labor force. The people are what give any community its character. I mean, you look up the definition of community in the dictionary, most people think of community as a place with a name on a map. But most of the definitions of community are all of the people living in some location, sharing wants, needs, goals, and so on and so forth. So where quality of place and quality of life are important characteristics, the people are the primary definer of those kinds of things. Extremely important. People are also important if they're supportive of what your economic development program is trying to do. That's a good thing. If they're not supportive, if they like to be obstacles, if they like to be ornery, then that's a bad thing. And so people are important that way as well. We are in a global investment and jobs auction. Okay? There are many fewer projects out there than there are places competing with those projects. I'll show you some numbers momentarily. So the businesses that have that investment to put somewhere and those jobs to create somewhere basically are auctioning them off to see where they can find the best deal in the best location. It is distinctly a buyer's market because there are so many more sellers like Naugatuck than there are companies that are the buyers. Not only are you the seller, but you're also a commodity. You are the commodity being sold, and you're being sold in a just-in-time market, which gets us back to the need for speed, and we will talk about that again. Why are you a commodity? Well, you are competing with, and these are 2007 numbers, the most recent I could find easily, you're competing with almost 20,000 incorporated municipalities in the United States, and another 16,500 unincorporated places, and 3,100 counties or county equivalents like the parishes in Louisiana, and you're competing with the rest of the world. It's not just competing with other places in Connecticut and New York and Massachusetts. You're competing with Ireland and India and Barbados and every other place that is trying to attract that business investment and employment. Now, within the economic development realm, the most current estimate of economic development organizations, those EDOs I mentioned before, most common estimate is somewhere between 15,000 and 18,000 economic development organizations. And you're competing with all of them. Speed is of absolute importance. The time frame that companies are allowing is very compressed, and they go through two phases. Phase one is a process of elimination. Those businesses out there that are looking for a location don't want to talk to 15 or 18,000 economic development organizations. They want to talk to 6, 4, a small number. So they want to eliminate as many places as possible, as fast as possible. And then when they get those finalists identified, they stack them up side by side, and they go through a process of comparison and evaluating those factors that we looked at before, market access and transportation and all of those kinds of things. So if you want to not be eliminated from consideration without ever knowing that there's a search going on, because about 70% of the initial research is being done how? Online. They're looking at websites. If the companies don't find what it is they're looking for when they start evaluating you off of your website, you're out of the game. You're eliminated. So you have to be ready ahead of time, as ready as possible ahead of time. I mentioned the time frame. 20 years ago, companies typically allowed about 18 months to go through the site selection process. It is now down to 12 to 16 weeks, 3 to 4 months, to go through that same evaluation process to pick a location. You know, a extremely compressed time frame. So it is, in terms of real estate, you gotta have an adequate supply of both sites and buildings that are available, ready to go now. I work every year in 6 or 8 states, different states. And I'm always dealing with their state economic development programs, and I always ask those folks, what percentage of your initial prospect inquiries are looking for a building to move into or a site they can build on? And the answer invariably is somewhere between 70 and 80% start out looking for a building, because it's faster to move into an existing building than to build one, and it's usually cheaper to move into an existing building, acquire it or rent it, do the retrofit, and move into it. Now, the breakdown in terms of actual projects isn't that high. It's somewhere probably closer to 60%, 55 to 60%, historically have found a suitable building and moved into it, but the remainder actually do construction. So we pick up 20% or so, and that's because, having done their evaluation, they may find everything that they need in your community except that piece of real estate, and they may bite the bullet and take the extra time and spend the extra money to acquire a site, design a building, get the permits and approvals, arrange their financing, go through construction, a much lengthier process, but that may be something they need to do. Right now, we are way higher than that, and that is because of the abundance of available modern building space that's on the market just about any place that you want. And again, you're competing with that. So, to be as competitive as you possibly can be, you have to have that adequate inventory of both sites and buildings, because if you need more buildings, you're going to need to have sites to put them on. So having those developable sites, like you've got in your industrial park, are important. Now, if construction is necessary, then we need to talk about fast-track permitting. And my site location friends say they would like to get all their local permits in somewhere between 7 and 14 days, and all of their state permits between 30 and 45 days. You can laugh now. The mayor already did. You can laugh. But here's some of the things that you're competing with, places that I've worked in the last couple of years. Claremont County, Ohio, fastest growing suburb of Cincinnati, did 2 things. They took all of their permitting agencies, planning office, building inspector, fire marshal, all those offices, and they built them a separate building out by the main highway that has a big old sign on it that says Permit Central. You kind of know where you need to go to get your permits. And then they passed a county ordinance that said, if I come in with a complete and accurate application proposing to do a type of project that is allowed in the zoning district I'm proposing to do it, the county, by ordinance, has to give me my approvals within 10 days. Okay? That's Ohio. It's not that far away. Chesapeake, Virginia. I'm not sure the first line is still there, but when I worked there a few years ago, they decided they wanted more corporate office buildings, and they passed an ordinance that required that, again, full accurate permit, office zone permits in 2 days. They also put on the staff of the Economic Development Department an engineer who worked with the companies reviewing the drawings, so that before the drawings were submitted to the building inspector and all of those permitting agencies, there was an engineer that had already helped create them and make them suitable for approval by Chesapeake. Phoenix, Arizona just did about a year and a half ago what they call their self-certification program. Does not apply to every type of project. Does not apply to facilities for public gathering, but applies to many of the business uses, retail and those kinds of things. Any architect or engineer who has been or was licensed in the state of Arizona and has been through Phoenix's training program can put their own stamp on the drawings, and the city of Phoenix will accept them without the city's engineers having to look at it. Again, it compresses the time frame and reduces the cost. You're competing with all kinds of things like this. So, whatever you can do to compress your permit and approval process will be very valuable to you. How are these communities doing that? More and more they're spending a lot of time getting all of their regulations written exactly the way they want them to be. And if the community has debated and discussed and approved those regulations, then why do you have to have lots of meetings and public hearings and stuff on a project if the project is in conformance with the regulations? They're giving the staff the authority to give out the permits. Also important, if you can have shovel-ready or pre-permitted sites where you didn't know what the use was going to be, but as a municipality, you take that piece of land through the permitting process and you decide what size building can go on it and where the setback lines have to be, and you can't get any closer to the edges of lots, and so on and so forth. That's another way communities are expediting the process. Brings up the topic of shovel-ready or certified sites or certified ready. There's 23 states that have them. They've got all kinds of different names. Connecticut does not have one at the moment, but I am working with the Department of Economic and Community Development right now to create one. And the fact that you've got your industrial park, in my estimation, puts you ahead of the curve. And here's why. Here are the most common elements of a certified site program. Dave, tell me if you've got it. Demonstrated control of the site.
Yes.
You got it. How about a stipulated price that's equal to or less than the prevailing market?
Yes.
Zoning in place, appropriate to what you're trying to get.
Yes.
We didn't rehearse this, by the way. Compatibility with surrounding land uses.
Yes.
You better say yes. Physical characteristics that result in reasonable developability. Not a whole lot of slope, not a whole lot of wetlands, those kinds of things.
Yeah, now we got troubles.
This is New England.
Yes.
You're an honest guy.
We're used to, I knew we should have rehearsed. Full utilities and state-of-the-art telecommunications either in place or readily available.
Yes.
Highway access.
Yes.
Environmental reviews are done, you know you got a clean site.
Yes.
And then the one that varies all over the lot is the certified site programs at the state level range from a minimum of 3 acres to some states only certified mega sites, 1,000 acres or more. Given the small size of lots of Connecticut projects, I'm urging DEC to be on the small end of the spectrum, and you can deliver sites in those ranges.
We just passed some zoning regulations in the first phase of the industrial park to allow the larger lots to be split down to a minimum of 2 acres.
Good. Now, here's some information from Conway Data. Conway Data is the publisher of Site Selection Magazine, one of the trade publications in our business. They track and publish every March a scoreboard state by state that looks at the number of announcements in the prior calendar year for manufacturing, corporate headquarters, offices of all kinds, warehouse distribution, research and development, or a mixture thereof, that meet one of 3 tests. $1 million or more in capital investment. That doesn't all have to be construction. It could be capital equipment as well. Or 50 jobs or more. Or 20,000 square feet or more. That can be a new building or an addition to an existing building. And look what has happened over the past 12 years. Started at 12,500, and last year we were at 4,978. We're down 60%. From where we were here. This is what it looks like in a graph form. You can ski on that. That's how fast it dropped. And yes, we've ticked up a little bit in the past 2 years, but nobody knows whether we're now on an uptrend that's going to get us back up here, or whether we're going to kind of plateau down where you see we've generally been plateaued the last 6 or 7 years. This is what happened in Connecticut. Segmented by either new or expanded manufacturing or the other projects, which I'm back on Conway Data's list, are those ones that weren't manufacturing.
Can you talk about the cause of the drop from 2000 to 2003?
Pardon me?
Can you talk about the causes of the drought of
2003, if you remember back then, we were kind of at the edge of another recession. So that was part of it. The more interesting thing is what caused the jump up in 2002. What happened in September of 2001? 9/11. And how many companies in New York, City of New York, were bailing out to northern New Jersey or Fairfield County? So that's what attributed to the 57. But if you look at typical Connecticut numbers, the last 5 years, the whole state of Connecticut has averaged slightly over 14 projects that are in that larger category. So message here, and I'll come back to it, is don't bet the farm on the big projects. Don't engage in the great buffalo hunt. Pay more attention to the smaller kinds of things.
Mark, the prior chart was nationwide?
That was nationwide, yeah.
When it was a dramatic drop over 3 years, we had a worse recession more recently.
Yeah.
And saw not much of a drop.
Yeah.
So it's hard to justify that the economy caused a drop from 2000 to 2003.
Yeah, there was something else going on, and I can't tell you what it was. Well, I can tell you part of what it was. That's when the major offshoring and outsourcing trend started, and a lot of the activity was getting moved across the pond. So that, there's probably a wide variety of variables that contribute to that, and I haven't seen anything that analyzed what exactly caused this drop off, which is the way to look at it. But it's noticeable. And, does Conway Data get 100% of the project announcements? Probably not, but they're probably off an equal amount from year to year, so that there's still a trend line. The numbers might be slightly different. Now, here's some things having to do with retail, because that's probably also of interest to you. I am not a retail expert, but I got a friend who is. David Milder from Danth Incorporated. You can do a Google for Danth Inc. and come up with his website. He tracks these things. He's a specialist in retail and downtowns. Occupied retail space in the United States in the past decade dropped by over 250,000 square feet, and is projected to drop by another 210 million square feet between 2012 and 2016. Okay. Lots of vacant retail space.
Mark, wouldn't that be driven by internet sales?
I'm going to get there. You're right. But there's a lot of other things going on. Many of the suburbs have pretty much stopped growing, so they're saturated in terms of their. We're looking around the country now. They're saturated in terms of stores, and they can't support more. There's an increasing movement back to the urban centers. And as the people move back to the urban centers, the retailers are looking back at the urban centers as places to go. I don't know how many enclosed malls there are in the United States right now, but David says that a third of them are deep trouble and will either close or be repurposed. And I've already seen a couple of those things. One of the original malls in Tampa, Florida, is now an office park under one roof. There's another mall down in Maryland that has been converted into a medical complex under one roof. So lots of things going on there. I found one article that said in 2000, and it was either 6 or 7, of the 2,000 largest malls in the United States, 400 of them had either closed or announced they were closing. Now, that's why you have lifestyle centers. We're talking enclosed malls now. You have lifestyle centers coming. You have enclosed malls being rethought. Retail chains no longer aggressively looking for new locations. Looking for fewer locations, and the places they're picking are shrinking in size. Now, here's to your point. Internet is now involved in 45% of retail sales. That doesn't mean that 45% of the purchasing takes place on the internet, but how many of you use your computer to do research on what's available, what the prices are, what stores are out there before you go and buy it? The biggest impact of the internet is on GAFO sales. That stands for general merchandise, apparel and accessories, furniture and home furnishings, and other categories including computers, electronics, books, hobbies, all of those kinds of things are part of GAFO. Consumers are getting more deliberate. They're spending more, and they're being very deliberate about how they spend it. They're cutting back on their discretionary, I want this purchase, and concentrating on the I need this purchase. They're using their credit card less. Their e-banking. How many of you do some of your banking online? Quite a few of you, maybe about half of the group. The more people do their banking online, the fewer branch banks we need, and in particular, we're seeing fewer branch banks, or David is, in downtown locations. So if you're going to be promoting retail, you have to get away from the old school retail marketing. We're a great place to set up your retail business and get into what's called retail economic gardening. Littleton, Colorado is one of the national leaders in working to help establish retail businesses and grow them. A few other competitive realities before I turn it over to Tom. As you know, the global economy has been changing, and Connecticut and Naugatuck are part of that global economy. I'm part of a group that is looking at how the economic development business is going to have to change in order to survive. So that people like Dave and I will have a job in the next couple of decades. And in getting prepared for a meeting in Houston a couple of weeks ago, I found an article in Inc. magazine. You ever heard of Baxter? Yeah, well, Baxter is a little old industrial robot, available for $22,000 a copy. Not the six-figure or seven-figure for the $22,000 a copy. You can take it out of the box, set it up, and program it to operate in an hour. And it is projected to replace 30 million American jobs in the next 10 years. And we're going to be seeing automation like that all over the globe. These are my words, but it comes from a study of the 6 New England states 6 or 8 years ago. And we, and you're part of this, were perceived as old, cold, and not very bold. Aging population, lousy climate, and risk averse. And those are not good things to hang your marketing program on. Connecticut, perceived all over the country, perhaps all over the world, as being a very high-cost location, because we are, and a very difficult place to get construction done. And that varies from community to community. The more you can separate yourself from that criticism, the better off Naugatuck will be. The economic development game is no longer one with home runs. It's bunts and singles. I don't want to say steals, because that gets into piracy, stealing businesses from other places. It's small is good. Small is beautiful. Diversification is better than specialization. It is way better to have a few of a lot of things than a lot of a few things. So diversify your economy as broadly as possible. Sustainability takes patience. Sustainability means having a long-term mentality. The Iroquois have a saying. In our every deliberation, we must consider the impact on the next 7 generations. Now, that's long-term. They got a corollary I like even better. We do not inherit the earth from our parents. We borrow it from our children. That's part of sustainability. That takes patience in order to endure a low level of immediate gratification. And finally, the field of dreams approach almost never works. It's not about if we build it, they will come. It's about if we're as ready and competitive as we possibly can be, maybe we'll hear from them. And maybe we can get them to locate here. Bottom line, the more you can do to be desirable, the more you can do to be competitive, the better chances Naugatuck will be to capture some of that relatively limited economic development investment activity. Get at least your fair share, and hopefully more than your fair share. Oh, that takes care of me? Go ahead.
Should I shoot myself now or later? How do you follow this guy? I came, Tom Hill, your broker down here, and I cover about a 30-mile radius these days. I used to make a living in Naugatuck Industrial Park in Greater Waterbury 10, 12 years ago, and I've been serving here in various capacities since Mayor Bill Rado. So I've worked with a lot of you guys, and you've had a nice lineup of people that get it, and that's why you have a 50-acre industrial park, and you have a nice town that's well thought of. Yeah, it's Mark. I was lucky enough to get to see Mark 2 years ago when Jay, the Naugatuck Economic Development Commission, Chester Carnacci, sent me as their broker to go watch Mark speak. And he's always very enlightening, and I listen to every word he has to say. And from what I'm seeing and what you're all seeing, we're in a major, major market correction. It's my opinion that the liberal Democrats in this federal government, the state government, and the federal government have just taken way, way, way too much out of the economy. The Republicans that went to war took too much out of the economy. We're trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. It's got to affect us. And so that's why we have a major market correction. They've devalued the price of everything in our real estate. Everything is worth less money. Now, in my world, you'd have all the people that own real estate that still want to sell it for the old prices and saw people that made loads of money in real estate. The Norman Drubners is an example of around here. He retired and got out before it all crashed. Or Keith Mahler in Waterbury, who sold his 1,000 apartments before the crash. You know, market time is their thing. But for the regular people or people that are in brokers like me, everything's worth less now. So I look at this and I say, this market is about price, utility, and workforce. And I'm saying it in a little different way than Mark's saying it, but the phone's still ringing. I get 30 calls a day on my 755 Hill line. People want to move, they want to rent, but they want the right price, the right location. I disagree with Mark that there's lots of vacant, available modern buildings around. We have a real lack of supply here. And I really, so hats off to Dave Prendergast for his honesty. The last 4 or 5 lots I have in the Naugatuck Industrial Park all need site work. One we had sold that I think a builder would have built, but the neighbors and him got in an argument and he still hasn't built. I have 4 or 5 others that need some site work, but what I'm doing now to try to be creative is tell people, fine, if you'll build a plant and you'll employ people and you'll put the shovel in the ground and sign something that you'll do what you say you can do, then we'll give you a discount on the lot and you can pay for it in 4 or 5 years. So we can get some more businesses to fill that industrial park. We don't have all kinds of shovel-ready sites, but I think it would be smart to do whatever we could do to get people involved in that. I agree with him in the competition. People look everywhere. But then again, they look. And when I broke in with Norman Drubner way back 32 years ago, he said it was, where does the boss of the company want to put his fanny every day? Versus where is the best location? Where does the boss want to be that owns the company? So I think that's an important factor in this day and age. I didn't prepare like Mark did, so I'm going to use a few notes. I think I set my watch. I'm not going to stay that long, and I'm happy to take any questions at any time, by the way. Hi, Mark. And to your TV audience, thanks for coming up. It's a great show. Is it Looking Up the Valley?
Looking Up the View from the Valley?
Yes, very excellent program. Appreciate it. Just want to see what we talked about before. Our Naugatuck Industrial Park, I'm able to do 1 or 2 deals there a year. We have a lot of nice buildings. We have 50 companies. We have a diversity. You're lucky to have a guy like Dave Prendergast who works really hard and had a nice relationship with him through many mayors. And the interesting thing is, if I get a buyer and I need to talk about permits or stuff in the park or to negotiate a deal or something to do with government, he's always there. He knows everybody. And the other thing I like about the NEDC, and Jay's your chairman, is just again last Wednesday night, we had the Naugatuck Business to Business Expo where we got most of the 50 businesses to come into Penn Steel, set up tables, get the banks to come, get the Economic Development Corporation from the state, DECD, the state agency, a lender who would give microloans and SBA 504 loans, which make less down payment. They had a table there. So we all got to network with each other to try to make some more business right here for Naugatuck within. And I walked out of there with a customer that has a factory that he pays rent on up the line and would like to build a new building in the park. Somebody in that meeting gave them to me. I found out from the guy from the CIDC, which is an SBA lender, that I could get $50,000 microloans, and I'm working on a retail sales business here in Naugatuck, that the buyer can borrow 50 grand extra to pay for his inventory or have working capital. So I think working amongst ourselves and everybody being a salesman for Naugatuck and saying, hey, come look here, there's a lot of tools we can use, and we have to be very careful not to be negative or say, oh, geez, you know, we can't make it here. We have to, we do have to survive and find a way to survive. Now, as I was listening to Mark, you know, and the others, I mean, let's face it, Mayor Bob, you're right. The whole world is in turmoil. It's a complicated world now. Everything's too expensive, everything moves too fast, everything's changing. So I still think we have to stop, slow down, assess our assets, and pay attention. I get about 30 calls a day still on my set. I have a 755 Hill line, like my name, it's on all my signs. I get 30 calls a day on that phone. So we listen, we say, what can somebody do? Where can we put you? Do we have anything that matches? It's a matching game. And again, Naugatuck has a nice reputation. It's got a nice downtown. You do a lot here with regard to, people are telling me about all the fun things on the green and all the events you hold. The people in the Naugatuck Industrial Park that work there say, oh, this is a nice place, I like it. So, I mean, I think you have an awful lot of potential in your location. It's easy to the highway. You don't have a giant unfunded pension liability like many cities. A lot of towns are having economic development forums to try to educate them what they're doing. Oxford had one last week. The attendance, the panel was fantastic, but the attendance was less than half of it. So I commend your community for coming out and having a listen to see what you might be able to learn about this, because as he spoke about the myths and the reality is you've got to wait on customers and try to match them to your situations in all the different factors. The Mayor Bob, who works his tail off and is always very accessible to me when I have customers, talks about turmoil. He's right, but how do we get around it? Benefits. All the towns are waking up to the fact that they have to give incentives and benefits and be some sort of deal making, because just the competition in the greater Waterbury area is significant. You have industrial parks. It used to be just Waterbury, and Waterbury had a couple of industrial parks. Now you have them in all the surrounding towns. So you see, Cheshire's has had incentives for ages. Watertown just said, oh, we better get on the stick and give them. Oxford is working on their airport economic development assistance zone or something like that. And they've been working on world trade groups and kind of these bigger projects. But it all takes time, but I think the towns are finding out they better jump on it themselves, simplify and give a little tax incentive, give a break on a building permit, do something to try to make a deal and get people to come into your town. And for the zoning people, the planning people, the mayors, the Dave Prendergasses, how do you facilitate and make it quicker? And you're right on, Mark, as usual. And I'm sorry if I'm repeating some of your stuff, but I'm the broker that tries to put the deals together. Again, we have a lack of confidence. How, you know, businesses are saying, gee, maybe I should just stay where I am and see what happens for a while. Every day I talk to people and they say, oh man, I'm waiting for the presidential election. I want to see who's going to win next. Because the feeling is that if Obama wins, we're going to be bigger government, it's going to stay slow, and we're going to be socialist. Whereas the people that are in business are saying, well, if Romney wins, the banks will go back in business and I can borrow money. Even if it takes a few years for the economy to get better, people will get positive about the change and maybe want to come out and spend a few bucks. And these are just what I'm hearing from all the customers I talk to every day. Today I showed 2 this morning buildings. I went to a political lunch by the Wolcott Chamber of Commerce where they had 4 candidates come out and talk about what they're doing. And that was 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and they're saying the same thing. There's a lack of confidence. So how do you do lots of business when people are holding on to their wallets and they're not sure if they should move or not? So all the more reason we need speed, we need help, we need any of the economic development programs. We can put together packages for people so they'll move. Who's looking? Every day I get calls from people that want to buy the modern vacant building, but we might not have it. So I show them buildings that could be improved, or I show them land. I think there's still lots of small business people that are looking. I've got some existing businesses that I've been showing over and over again because many people that are out looking want to buy themselves a job. Have you seen all the restaurants that are opening? They open, they close, they open, they close. People are buying themselves jobs. So I think helping people sell their businesses and supporting your local businesses and shopping around your own town is very, very important. It's a tough financing environment as well. I find that the banks only want to lend you money if you have money. On the other hand, when the NEDC put their program on for the Biz-to-Biz Expo, it was interesting. We had all the commercial bankers going from table to table saying, can we loan you some money? And they all have that tool in their pocketbook that we all want to use. Typical conventional financing is 20 to 40% down. Your credit's got to be real good, and there's a lot of fees and appraisals and things you have to go through. Well, the bankers all have the tool, which is the SBA 504 loan, where if you have a good account and have good credit, you can get maybe 10% down, a low interest rate, and a long time to pay, as well as maybe they'll finance your furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So it's fun to be at this Naugatuck Economic Development function and watch the bankers from Naugatuck Valley Savings and Loan, from Naugatuck Savings Bank, and the CIDC go from table to table. Need any money, need any money? As a matter of fact, NBSNL, he even had a residential guy going from booth to booth to booth. Need a new mortgage for your house. It's easy to refinance right now. So it was fun, and we all came away with some business for each other. Investors are out in force looking for shopping centers that have income. There's more money around than there are deals, is my point. There's loads of cash looking for opportunity in this economy, but the numbers have to make sense, and the investors have to get a 10% return on their money or more. Unless you can find a CVS, we all need drugs, so the CVSs will be a less return. How many CVSs for sale, and how many you in the audience have $5 or $6 million to lay down for one of those? So that's a limited market. The doctors were all out in force, but they're all kind of iffy now too because of Obamacare. You know, where is this going to land? Is Obama going to win, and is it going to be, clear sailing for Obamacare, or is Governor Romney going to win? And you saw in the debates that he said, "I'm going to stop Obamacare. I'm going to repeal it." So the doctors all of a sudden say, "Whoa!" And the same thing happened in Waterbury with the LHP and the LHP merger with Waterbury and St. Mary's Hospital. There was going to be a lot of activity down there. And then before that, you saw the doctors that wanted to come to Parcel C. So I think you have the right conditions in Naugatuck with, as far as Renaissance, you have a ton of permitting that everybody did for economic development studies, municipal development plans, environmental impact studies. You're geared. I'm bringing a major developer who wants to do mixed use and has tenants that he builds for to Naugatuck shortly to tour all the parts of Renaissance Place. And this guy has the financial backing, and he has tenants because he owns millions of square feet, and he's always grown his tenants in the new building. And he's so flexible that he doesn't just want to rent. He'll sell them the buildings too, so it gives that much more flexibility. Working on, have a couple other lots in Naugatuck Industrial Park. One that'll build 90,000 feet, and we have all this stuff posted on, as you were saying, use the internet. We have all our stuff posted on the internet. I've got some bites on that. But also, I go around and knock on doors. I get speeches like this. I go to Chamber of Commerce. I'm out all the time knocking on doors, pressing the flesh, and trying to meet new people, because it takes more than just the internet. Because many times, as Mark said, you got to be able to put the whole package together and show them the whole package and why it possibly could work. And you got to make them feel wanted. Another thing that I thought about Mark, he's saying about being in a hurry. Time kills deals. So the sooner you can get your act together, and me as the broker can get them the information, the sooner I get paper signed, get deposits, and keep moving everybody towards the closing table, you have a better chance of making a deal. So, that's what I do, and that's what I do in an industrial park, and I always have done a ton of business around Naugatuck, and it's been good to me. On that note, I did agree with Mark that, on all the retail, that, you're not seeing loads of new stores because they're not opening loads of stores. Everybody's got this lack of confidence. So for us, it's talk to people every day. It's one deal here. It's one deal here. Now, on the other side of the coin, I'm having a pretty darn good year. By July, I was just about halfway through my year and pretty happy about it, because in the commercial real estate business, it takes a long time to close the deals and a long time for your payday. But by July, I was going great guns. I had a lot of deals closed. I was halfway through my year. I said, oh man, good. I went to Cape Cod, and I came back, and I haven't closed much since. I have 6 deposits on a lot of big different properties around, and now my time is spent every day trying to get the permits, get the lawyers to do their work, get the banks to give the financing, and keep everybody going through those 6 or 8 steps he said a company has to go through to finally pull the trigger and either move in the building or start the construction. And with any kind of luck, I got a couple of payouts Friday, and have a couple more big ones that are going to land, I hope, November, early December. But you know, your job is never over in economic development or as a commercial real estate broker, because you got to keep putting all the things together. But I can't remind you enough times that Naugatuck is a well thought of place. It's easy to do business here, and I think a lot of people do like it because of the successes we've had already. But you have to have patience and look beyond the everyday to say, what do we got to do to get it to the end? What are all the conditions that are the businesses that want to move in? And that's kind of how it goes. I'm finding that I'm doing more leasing lately and looking into doing more leasing because there's more the existing buildings are what's left, and it's very hard to get financing still, and it's time consuming to build a new building. And people are saying, geez, can I wait a year or 18 months for the new building to get built, and how will the economy be then? Whereas if I can move into a new existing building now, not too bad. So I'm generally an optimistic person, but with that said, I'm working harder now than I did a long time ago. And but I'm trying to keep my attitude good. Don't be a baby. Keep ducking and weaving. I'm hiring a few new real estate agents that are commercially minded that can help me, and readjusting to this economy. Because it's been a new world for a while, and it's still pretty darn flat out there, and it's hard to plan the future at the moment. So I'm more like day to day and month to month, and reassessing and talking to other professionals around of what's happening. Use my website, get 3,000 hits a month, post everything, answer all my phone calls, send out 100 postcards a week to people I meet, update our database. My wife updates it every single day. And we keep ducking and weaving and dancing with people to try to get to the transaction level or advice to people that might want to do one or might want to decide where they're going in the future. On that note, I think I will move over for Mr. Prendergast, who I enjoy working with, and then we'll answer some questions. Thanks for your attention. A lot of wires up here.
Yeah, it's a hazard zone up here. Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to kind of wrap up with talking about a few things that we're doing here in town that kind of eat off of what Mark and Tom were talking about as far as being ready and having sites ready. First of all, let me talk about the downtown revitalization. Planning first. Planning is always important because you've got to be ready. We worked with the zoning commission a couple of years ago and created a special development district downtown, which provided us with the opportunity to do mixed-use, transit-oriented development in the downtown. We still think that that's the way to go in the downtown, and we look forward to having opportunities to that in the future. As far as planning is concerned, we've worked with the State Department of Economic and Community Development. They completed an environmental impact evaluation, which is part of their requirements for providing state assistance. And we completed what was mentioned earlier, municipal development plan, which is also the town's responsibility to have a plan that in order to get both state and federal, be eligible for both state and federal funding. We also sought grants and were successful in securing a number of environmental grants to get what we referred to before as shovel-ready sites. Remediation, parcel C is fully remediated and is ready for development. It's a shovel-ready site. As far as assessment is concerned, we secured a number of grants. We had from both the Valley Brownfields pilot. We did a phase 1 and phase 2 on the Church Street parking lot that the town owns. We have just completed and got a sign off from EPA, Federal Environmental Protection Agency, on a phase 1, phase 2, and remedial action plan for parcels A and B, which are obviously the GDC site. A is where the building is, and B is the parking lot. And that's a total of about 10 acres plus. We also, where we are right now, we secured a grant from the Brownfields program at the Department of Economic and Community Development, and we're doing a phase 1 and phase 2 on this site, the train station building. That's about 2.3 acres. That site, phase 1 has been completed and submitted to DECD. Phase 2, we just received the draft last week, so we're doing our review before we send it up to our funding agency. Other downtown improvements that help support development. Before I came here, the town secured a $1.3 million grant to do streetscape improvements in the downtown for Church Street, Old Firehouse Road, Maple Street. That was completed in 2003, I believe. And we also, for those of you who are driving around, you notice that the phase 1 of the North Greenway is under construction right now. Actually, you see work being done this week at the corner of South Main and Maple Street. Excuse me. The state completed a reconstruction project on the Route 63 bridge, and we are in the process. We've secured some of the funding. We put out a bid. We realized we don't have enough money to do the reconstruction of the Maple Street bridge, which will also include the completion of the traffic signalization at Firehouse Road, and it seems that it will also be able to include the demolition of the but ugly building known as 1 South Main Street. In regard to industrial, we talked a little bit about tools and incentives in your tool bag. We get a great deal of benefit from the Enterprise Zone program. We're part of the Naugatuck Corridor Zone. And recent projects, Chemtur Corporation completed in excess of a $10 million new investment in the 12 Spencer Street building and the 400 Elm Street building. And completed, they have relocated over 75 high-end scientific jobs into these buildings from their headquarters in Middlebury. Labag Technical Glass, locally known as Naugatuck Glass, has done some significant renovations on their property in order to create 4 new production lines and bring 60 new employees. They're now employing, they're our largest manufacturing employer right now at over 150 employees. Electric Cable Compounds, a company we were fortunate to attract to the industrial park. They built a 40,000 square foot building in 2006. They just completed, the end of last year, a 20,000 square foot addition. They're up to 65 employees and plan to add 8 to 10 new employees over the next couple of years. Other projects we've been involved in, Yo Farm, the Oak Crunch product, Vitech Research, we attracted from Derby, Vivex Medical, and Animatics Corporation. These are several of our Enterprise Zone projects. We mentioned competition and so forth. I'm very pleased with how we've done on the Enterprise Zone program. The state of Connecticut last year, the #1 community as far as number of projects approved for the October 1, 2011 grand list was Waterbury with 6. We were tied for second with 4 out of probably 25 to 30 Enterprise Zone communities in the state. So I think that's bodes well for our ability to attract people to the town. Some steps we took, and we mentioned this briefly, but we've changed some zoning regulations in the first phase of the industrial park. This past year was completed in November 11th, which allows some of the larger underbuilt lots in the industrial park, the 5 and 10 acre lots that only have 50, 60,000 square foot of building on them. They will be able now to subdivide those lots to create a minimum of 2 acre lots. And this will, again, give us an opportunity to create new building sites without a significant cost to the community of infrastructure, roads, utilities, and so forth. So it's a big opportunity for us. Unfortunately, private individuals own that, so we got to continue to work with them to encourage them to subdivide their lots and bring in candidates ourselves and Tom and so forth, so we can take advantage of that opportunity. We also just submitted a new tax abatement ordinance for the review of the Board of Mayor and Burgess. I think we met with the joint boards a couple of weeks ago, the Board of Finance also. And this will give us another tool in our toolbox to be able to incentivize developers to track interest in some of the substantial sample sites that are very difficult right now. You know, as Tom said, there's a very weak market out there now for commercial and retail types of sites. The 38-acre Hershey site on New Haven Road and the 11-acre Risden site on Rubber Avenue. And then finally, and Tom mentioned this a couple of times, we sponsored our second business-to-business expo last week at the industrial park, giving people an opportunity here to know who their neighbors are, to know what kind of business they do, to do business, to encourage them to do business, and keep the economy flowing, and keep the sales and the orders on a local basis, to keep the money flowing here. So anyway, that's just a kind of a thumbnail sketch of the things we've been doing to try and improve the atmosphere for economic development in the community. With that, I'll turn it over to Jay.
No wonder we put it here, Dave. It wasn't turned on. Good evening. As mentioned before, I'm Jay Carlson. I'm the chairman of the Economic Development Corporation here. We've thrown an awful lot of information at you this evening, and at this point I'd like to open up the floor for any questions you have about the information that has been presented, or any other questions, concerns that you have about the economic development process in town, and what it is that we're trying to accomplish as the Economic Development Corporation of this town. Sir?
If parcel C shovel ready, how come we can't get town to put a big old sign out there for sale tomorrow?
Good question, sir.
We certainly can do that, and that's actually not a bad suggestion. I mean,
I'll get you the plywood, what's the hold up?
I'm sorry?
I'll get you the plywood and the paint, what's the hold up?
There's no reason we couldn't put a sign up there. We had a sign when we were under construction, getting it remediated. Prior to, say, a month ago, it wasn't fair game for anybody to come and buy the property because we were under contract and obligation with Alex Conroy, who had the preferred development rights for that site. Now that that has come and gone, and we are in the process of entertaining other opportunities for other developers in the town, there is no reason we couldn't put a sign out there. So that's a very good suggestion.
We're looking at different development goals. We've got to stop looking at these big pipe. I mean, parcel C could have been ready a long time ago. Chop it off. Why do we got all tied in and married with Alex? That was crazy. I told some Angelo that a long time ago.
Well, I think one of the things, I hear what you're saying, but one of the traps that we don't, or the rabbit holes that we don't want to spiral down into, if we spot develop throughout downtown, that the whole idea behind a preferred developer and a preferred development area that encompassed some 60 acres is so that we had a comprehensive downtown that all looked the same and looked like what we're used to up around the green and what have you. If we allow anybody to come in and buy any property to build anything at any given time, we're going to lose control as a community of what our downtown's going to look like. And we're going to have a bunch of big boxes that are off the highway that are not necessarily what is going to be the best for the long-term development of this town. At least is not in the best interest of the future development of this town. Because you want a comprehensive, that we have a special zone district that's already been designed for the downtown that says how high the buildings can be, what the facade of the building is going to look like, what the purpose of the building are. That's obviously expressed as much as correctly. That's all done by design, so that we don't end up with a Home Depot or a Lowe's or a huge Walgreens or some other large big box in downtown Naugatuck. You know, go off exit 15 in Derby. Is that what you want to see in downtown Naugatuck? I personally don't. I want to see a comprehensive development that is smart and is going to work towards the growth of this community in the long term. It's going to look like what the downtown of Naugatuck should look like. That's the philosophy of the NEDC and the current administration, so that's what we're
Right,
working
I
towards.
give you guys a lot of credit for trying.
And we're going to continue to try.
Yeah, so related to that, I guess, I mean, I see the NEDC role now, without Conway involved, is putting together kind of a macro plan that you'll be able to sell off pieces of and people will fit inside of that. Is that, I mean, is that how you see it?
Exactly. I mean, the NEDC is the development/redevelopment agency for the town of Naugatuck. And the way that I envision it going forward, and hope that it works, is that we'll become sort of the general contractor, as it were, to a series of subcontractors. If we are fortunate enough to find the right developer that's able to take on some of the, a huge section of this and has the financing behind him or her before they get here, to say, here's what I got, and here's what I can do in X time frame, that would be something that we would consider, obviously. But again, the zoning district that we've already designed for the downtown, we can overlay at any given time, and the NEDC can apply for that zone district. That will give us the ability to bring multiple developers in here and say, you want to take a crack at parcel C? Here you go. Got control of parcels A and B at this point? Go for that. In that fashion, we can do multiple developers and still have the same product that's going to look and smell and feel the same because we designed it that way.
And we add that extra layer without adding months of approval times?
Well, yeah, the zone district exists. I mean, we went through a very long process to get that in the beginning of the Alex Conway days. I mean, that was one of the first things that we did. It took, a few more months than I would have liked to have seen, but we have it.
That's behind us.
It's behind us. It exists. We need to apply for it, and we need to have a reason to apply for it, and there's no reason that it can't be applied in relative short order. This young lady over here.
I'm still on the Alex Conway. Not to be negative, but 8 years ago we sat here and we came and said that it was going to develop, and it took us 8 years to say, okay, it's not working. I know the economy has changed over the last 8 years, but I don't think we have the backers and funding that we proposed yet. What these developers now that we're working with, are we going to move on them, and do they have the backing that they're saying they have? And if they do, is it going to be, as you said, individual sections? I mean, you say no big boxes. You can have a small retail lot. It's a retail store, but it's not a big box. So are these developers have backers that they know that there are going to be some retail stores, some apartment buildings that are going to come in and not just develop, but have that.
To go back to the explanation about Alex Conway, he did have backers, and he did have a proven track record coming into Naugatuck. We vetted that process before we even engaged him to a great extent. And this was through multiple administrations, so it's not just like it was. I'm just saying this was a long process. And as a matter of fact, one of his major investors that was ready to pull the trigger just prior to the end of 2008 was Lehman Brothers. And so I think to this day that they didn't pull the trigger and get in bed with Alex, or Alex get in bed with him, because we would have something that is partially or half built, which would have been even a worse situation in my mind than having it as nothing's been built, through the Alex days. That being said, we have yet to go through an RFP process because of a number of reasons. Up to this point, we have only owned 5 acres that we have control of the town, parcel C and the train station and another small parcel in downtown. That's all we've had control over. If anybody has seen the paper and or looked online, we are in the process of working through a negotiation with General Datacom and hope in the very near future that we're going to have control over that site as well. So we're now going to have 15 acres under the control of the town so that we're able to control our destiny and do something on a grander scale. At that point in time, once we know that we have control over that, we have been approached by developers, many since the contract with Alex has disappeared. We have sat with some of them. Many of them we have said, sit tight, we're not quite ready, because we don't want to rush into something prematurely. We want to make sure that we have our ducks in a row. But yes, it is going to include more than just one parcel. And yes, it is going to allow them, and we're going to vet them in a different fashion. And I doubt very sincerely that we're going to give anybody preferred development rights over the entire downtown area that
We're
we're
going
going
to
to
sign like 5 or 10 year contract.
That would be not a good thing for many, many, many reasons. At the time, prior to 2008, 5 years ago, 2007, and the year and a half or so before that, when we went through the process of negotiating the development agreement with Alex, it was the right thing to do. We did our homework, and we entered into it with our eyes wide open. None of us in this room, none of us anywhere could have predicted what was going to happen at the end of 2008, early 2009, and what it has done to us as a nation from an economic standpoint. If things were the same way they were in 2007, we'd be leaving here. We wouldn't be having this conversation, number one. And number two, we'd probably be all going out to the new restaurant down the street to have, some appetizers and a beverage or two. But that didn't happen. But we're going to be much more careful. Not that we weren't careful before, but I guess, we know a lot more now than we did then. We're going to make sure that we do it properly. Sir.
Actually, I have 2 questions. The first one, a lot of was mentioned about EDOs and how we're trying to compete against other economic development communities. Has there been any thought, Bob mentioned right at the start that the commission corporation here is patterned after the one in Shelby. Has there been any collaborative types of things? At least as a Valley community, I'm sitting in a meeting, I go to a meeting now in Ansonia, it's the same thing. There's a lot of crossover between what's trying to be done here and what either has already been done in other communities or is being thought about in Derby or Shelby within this region. So looking at the whole picture with the Chamber of Commerce, mentioned was that, what the panel thinks about, as opposed to always competing against each other, trying to, we want the business, working together so that as a region or even as a state, we're going to bring in overall the best economic development situation as opposed to.
We work with the Valley COG and the Central Connecticut COG. We work together to create a comprehensive economic development strategy for the Naugatuck Valley corridor. That provides us with the opportunity to qualify for economic development administration loans and grants and programs for them. Obviously, with the federal budget being the way it is, nothing has been happening with EDA funding. But we have a priority project in there that's been approved. It's approved by the whole group. So, Derby had one too. I think they had one rolling before the federal budget got into town. I think they had received the last grant in this area. But we work. As a matter of fact, we've got a meeting coming up middle of next month on that board. So we work collaboratively with we are. I'm on the board of the Connecticut Economic Development Association, so we work together with our colleagues around the state. If we have good ideas, Mark actually serves on the same board with me. If we have good ideas, or someone has good ideas, there's something called creative theft, and that happens a lot. When I was in New Britain, we created the first downtown special taxing district in the state of Connecticut, and I still receive calls from people asking me about that and some of the intricacies of what we did to create that. So we all work together, and it's not, we're not trying to work in isolation because we're small. We're a small area compared to some other parts of the country. And what's good for us and what's good for the area eventually is good for us. If the company, for instance, take Chemtura. They had an opportunity here to, with their bankruptcy, to reduce the amount of space they were renting in Middlebury, and they own the buildings here. So it worked out. We had a creative coming together, and it worked out that these buildings got renovated. We kept those jobs, and they actually expanded the number of scientific jobs right here in Naugatuck. So there's still, people didn't have to move. People were, for a number of years, we're working in Middlebury. They're now back here. So, you know, it benefits the group if it benefits the town.
Mayor, did you want to comment on that?
No, I just think that's true on an administrative level as well. I mean, we have conversations with the valley mayors on many occasions. I do think one of the things that is a challenge for this region is the region is the corridor. The region is the Route 8, the rail, the river, and the state likes to put us in different planning regions, different public safety regions, and I think that reduces our overall clout as a region. I consider our region not a stake in the ground and 15 miles out. I consider it linear, and I think you're seeing that more and more around the country. So as Dave says, the business can't be in Naugatuck, but the workers can still have their jobs without relocating. We communicate on those levels all the time, and Dave does a great job working with his peers as well on a day-to-day basis.
The other question was, Tom mentioned restaurants, and I learned the Portuguese around here, huge Portuguese population in Naugatuck, different ethnic diversity, but still ethnic in lower Naugatuck Valley. Is there any thought that the restaurants that have done well, you know, some come, like I said, and 6 months later they close, or some are expanding. The ones that I see have done really well are the ones that also get involved in the community. In other words, they do, I think there's a new Mexican place that just opened in Shelton that's also based here, and they've done things for high school. So once, instead of just, oh, it's just about the food, and if it's a very good restaurant, but doesn't get out there and get visible, is the city doing anything to then almost require or expect restaurants that come in? You know, not only are you going to have to be a good operating restaurant, but you need to get involved in the community.
I would say this, and I open with it, and I'll close with it. You know, the government can play a role in economic development, but at the end of the day, it's the private sector that drives that process. I know many people in the restaurant business don't have a free moment to think about what community activities they're going to get involved in. They're working 24/7 or pretty close to keep their businesses open. We have to build partnerships with anyone who approaches us or if we come in contact with. But there's a role of government and there's a role of the private sector. And one of the questions I always get is, why doesn't business X come to location Y? And it's almost a question of the government. Why aren't you picking and choosing what business comes where? That's just not how it works. I mean, it's not East Germany. It's not a state-controlled system. There's, as Mark mentioned, there's reasons why communities pick sites. Some restaurants do very well based on their niche, based on their location, based on the involvement that they have with the community. But that is part of the market system in which we live.
It's interesting that when you talk about the restaurants in town, Naugatuck, especially in downtown Naugatuck, has a huge diversity in the type of restaurants that are here. I mean, there are 2 Portuguese restaurants, there's a Thai restaurant, there's a Mexican restaurant, there's a Vietnamese restaurant, we now have Texas barbecue. I mean, in a very short, small area, there's a ton of different types of restaurants. The best thing that I think that we can do as the Economic Development Corporation and as a town is to build street traffic in downtown Naugatuck that's going to allow those restaurants to survive. Because bottom line is, you've got to give people a reason to come downtown. You hear about the malls are closing, and they are. But you need to give people a reason to get downtown and get the foot traffic. For the people that lived in Naugatuck back in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, at the end of shift, there were 3,000 to 5,000 people walking through town, and that's when there were all kinds of diners and restaurants and shops that thrived. We need to garner that kind of, are we going to get that kind of people at any given time? I mean, if we were West Hartford, probably. But, we're Naugatuck, and we have to be realistic with our expectations. But we do need to give people a reason to go downtown, to drive that foot traffic, so the restaurants that do exist will thrive, and other restaurants will come into play.
One more on that. I think what Dave touched on also, the business incentive program will assist us with the restaurant market, with some of the retail market. Right now, we have a very good incentive for a manufacturing or distribution focused business, and that's the enterprise zone. It's been around, it's been successful, Dave manages it phenomenally. We have not had anything when someone comes and says, we would like to put a restaurant, we would like to put a retail establishment. We can steer them towards SBA, but there's a lot of strings attached and hoops they have to go through to get there. This incentive program will not solve all our problems, but as Mark pointed out, it's another tool for us to use to attract business, whereas we didn't have that before. And it goes back to Mark's equation, that at the end of the line, what is that bottom line number with your sales and your cost of doing business? This won't solve all that problem. It lowers the playing field and makes those numbers work a little better. And we hope to approve that at our November board meeting of the Board of Mayor Purposes.
The other thing too, I would say, I didn't know we had a lot of diversity in restaurants, and then you're almost a template for the other towns. You know, as opposed to, I mean, if there are other towns that come in, they can learn, how do we get to just Italian and, you know, Portuguese, Polish, who bring in all these other ethnicities to each town.
And we didn't even talk about the 15 pizza places and the 20 Chinese food restaurants there. I know we've got a few people. This young lady, I think, is first, and then I'll go with these gentlemen.
As a small business owner on Church Street, one of the things that Mr. Pendergrass pointed out is something about the Church Street parking lot. You just touched on it. Their traffic down on Church Street is just horrendous. And the people that park, I have to do my business. Every day, people come in and say, I couldn't find a parking space. Yet we have the lot, but the people that park on Church Street are all the ones that work on Church Street. I mean, come on.
I mean, we've heard that comment and complaint many, many, many times over. And why business owners on Church Street would allow themselves and or their employees to park in the spots that their customers should be parking in is beyond me. Again, you know, going to the mayor's point, there is just so much you can do from a governmental standpoint.
What can we do? What can we do?
Go yell at your neighbors.
I just mentioned in 1977, I was working for the Middlesex Chamber of Commerce, and I ran the Downtown Trade Bureau, which is probably one of the most successful downtowns in the state. And that was a constant problem also. I mean, they had parallel parking, they had huge amounts of parking, and the employees and the owners parked right in front of the stores. And, you know, it drove people crazy.
I mean, you can't fight with people that you work on the same street with every day, because that just, it's not a solution. It just creates more of a problem. Well, what can we do?
I honestly don't know. I mean, you know, if and when we build some of these areas in downtown, there will be additional parking that's provided, but then you're going to still ask these employers and employees of these companies to park. Say we did build a parking garage on Parcel C, park in the parking garage, and then walk up to Church Street. Well, they're parking right in front of their stores now, and they won't walk a few blocks or a block from the municipal office.
Can we do meters? I mean, you got to have 1 hour parking signs. Nobody pays attention to that. I mean, there's a loading zone outside of my store that I actually need to have to load, and I can't use it half the time unless I leave my truck parked there.
We can enforce that on a police level, but there's a balance between trying to enforce in a very difficult economic climate where you're enforcing against the very people who are still here contributing to it. You know, I do think one of the best strengths of downtown can have is some sort of organization that they can work within the structure. We've had a downtown business organization that, you know, kind of tried to get off the ground, but my experience with organizations like that is it doesn't require staff. And I know we have a chamber of commerce that's fully staffed with the regional chamber in Waterbury. I know it's an investment and there's not a lot of extra money lying around, but successful downtowns have organizations and they have the capacity to work through staff on issues like that. You know, it's one thing to have a group of volunteers and they come together in a social setting and say these are our problems, but then 4 months go by and nothing happens. I do think if you want that voice and want the cooperative spirit, you know, becoming involved in an organization that has staff capacity would be helpful. I can't tell you, in all honesty, that we're going to start ticketing every car on Church Street because in this climate, you know, as much as we get mad at that business owner, we still want them there.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know, and that's the hard part for us. Some of that's self-policing. And as Jay said, you've got parking opportunities, they just aren't right in front of your store.
Well, will there be any other opportunity, you said in the future, just the Church Street lot, but you're not sure what else might be presented down?
Well, I would, you know, as we develop the downtown, obviously parking issues need to be addressed. And in any development that happens, appropriate parking needs to be there as well. If the medical center had been built to the size that we originally thought it was going to be built, it was going to be a 500 parking lot, a 500 space parking garage, which 200 of those spaces were going to be appropriated to DOT for the train station. So there would have been sufficient parking because it is, depending upon the time of day or night that you're going in and out, there would have been plenty of additional parking in downtown. As we develop these other sites, depending upon what it is we decide to do, there will have to be appropriate parking to do that. So, it's not going to be a short-term solution, but long-term, I would say yes, that's the case. We've got. I'm sorry, you've already asked a question.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Lindgren and
I just have a question. The gentleman was saying that they're going to have a general contractor, like Conway was, on this project downtown here.
No, that's not, no, what I said is that the Economic Development Corporation, which is the development/redevelopment arm of Naugatuck, would act as a general contractor, and I use that as a term, so that we're not going to have just one preferred developer at this point in time. We would have multiple developers, but the NEDC would be overseeing those developers to ensure that the development that happens is contiguous throughout the town, and so that it all looks the same and feels the same, so it would be as if it was one developer doing the entire thing.
Because my concern was, the town has the zones and they have the regulations what can go here and there. And if a contractor came in on the zone and said, look, I want to build, well, we'll say Church Street, I want to build a restaurant. I want to take out 2 stores down there and I want to build a restaurant that's going to occupy that space, which he would be paying taxes, so. He would be able to come to you people and say, look, I have the money, I'm ready to start, I need the permits, I know what your zoning regulations are, and the specs are. Do I have to go through somebody else, like when Conway had this all tied up? You more or less, that's the impression I got. You more or less had to come to Conway and go through him to get anything done.
Well, during the time that we were under contract as Conway was the preferred developer, that is true. For the 5 years that he was the preferred developer under contract with the town, he had all of the development rights for the 60-acre parcel around downtown. That's not that way at this point. So if somebody were to come in now and say, I want to build thus and so, and they fit within the zoning regulations that we have, and they fit into the plan of development for the town of Naugatuck, then yes, they absolutely could do that, and it would not be any different than any other situation.
Okay. Thank you. No, I just didn't want to see him get tied up.
Yeah, no, we don't either.
Thank you.
Jay, you mentioned the need for downtown traffic. In other words, people moving downtown.
Foot traffic, yes.
I think that we need people moving downtown 24/7. And therefore, I really applaud the NEDC for your, in my judgment, vision, approaching a master plan for downtown and not grabbing something without thinking the whole thing through. You've been working on it for years, and I really applaud what you've done. And hearing that you're working further to acquire Parcel B, that was a comment made tonight, I think. I just would say go for it, do whatever you can to do it, and you'll get some negativity in this economy toward that goal. But it really is key, in my judgment, to the overall success of downtown. In must be 30 years ago, believe it or not, I'm not a young man anymore, I was head of the committee put together by the Chamber of Commerce to study the needs for downtown. The needs for Naugatuck, not necessarily downtown. And the 2 heavy priorities that came out were, let's do something with the riverfront, develop that. And the second was downtown housing. I thought Renaissance Place was a marvelous idea, and it's just unfortunate that it didn't happen, but I hope you and the town can I will continue to support you, and I hope the townspeople continue to support you for however long it takes to accomplish what you're trying to do. And it will answer this young lady, as you addressed her question about parking. Because once we have a proper development, proper master plan in action, parking will eventually be resolved, in my judgment.
Thank you for your comments. And even though Conway Development and Renaissance Place, as it had been envisioned, 5, 6, 7 years ago, has gone by the wayside, a mixed-use, transit-oriented development for downtown Naugatuck, maybe not as large a scale as what we were hoping was going to happen, is still the vision of the NEDC as well as our current administration. So we're going to continue to work towards that end because we believe, as I said earlier, as opposed to having this spot building, we want a planned development. We want something that makes sense, that isn't going to be just grabbed. We could have done that 25 years ago or 20 years ago. We could have grabbed whatever big box was available and thrown it on parcel C. We turned down offers as a town, to do that. So yes, it is a tedious process. We should have undertaken it many years prior, but for whatever reason the town didn't. And we are going to stay the course and make it happen, and we will build this thing. It's not the field of dreams, we will build it, but they'll be here. They're not just going to come.
Okay, and as your broker for the industrial park, I'm not your broker for Renaissance, but I agree with Earl. I saw the work that was put in, and I was very involved in it. I'm going to Boston tomorrow to meet one of the biggest developers in Boston tomorrow and try to talk him into looking at this. Within the next couple of weeks, I'm bringing another developer here that owns 1 million square feet and is tenant-driven. And today, nobody's building anything unless they have tenants, or if they're apartment builders, they'll build apartments because that's where the market is right now. Let me just finish. I love Naugatuck. I made offers on 3 different houses here in the last 2 years because if I get the right house at the right economics, I'll move here. So I think you got a lot to be thankful here. You just got to hang in because the economy is challenging.
And you talk about the valley and how we're attached to the valley. We still believe that affordable housing in Naugatuck is moving up the valley. People are still looking down in Fairfield County, whether it's Shelton and even further south, they are still moving up in this direction. And we think that we can seize that opportunity. We just need to find the right partners to do that. This gentleman, I know, had a question.
Well, it kind of is, I had 2 questions. One was kind of covered. It's about generating the foot traffic. Something you said, what was it, 30 years ago, we had thousands of people getting off shift and walking through downtown Naugatuck. It seems you have to attract the jobs to get the foot traffic. I don't know if you can attract the businesses and then have that attract the foot traffic. I think jobs have to come first, or the people have to come first.
I think that the way that it was laid out, being a mixed-use opportunity.
That's why it works.
It has a housing component. That housing component will bring along with it the retail and entertainment and restaurant component. Do they all happen at the same time? We would hope so, because you need the foot traffic of folks that can have housing, people that don't have children. And the entire idea is not to add families in downtown Naugatuck, but to either bring in young people, young professionals who are working down the line, who don't have children, and or people whose children have grown and have moved out of the house and are looking to stay in Naugatuck, but downsize because they don't need the large house and the large yard and that kind of thing. And get those people downtown to support the other businesses and the retail and the restaurant operations that would happen around all of that sort of thing.
Right, and at Renaissance Place, it all happened together, it all happened at the same time. But the challenge for the NEDC now is to do it piecemeal and have it still fit together.
There's no question we've got plenty of challenges, and we're dealing with an economy that's completely different now than when this vision first happened. The vision hasn't changed. What we want to see collectively for downtown Naugatuck is still very realistic. It's just how are we going to get from here to there. I'm not going to pretend to say that I have the answer. I just know that if you know what your goal is, and you keep working towards it, eventually you're going to get to where you need to go.
The second question, if I'm not monopolizing?
Yes, go right ahead.
You are. This conversation has been really good about attracting business. But I think there's another piece that we really haven't talked about it. And I think Mark touched on it with your example about Subway. Subway's headquartered in Milford because because Frank's mother lived in Milford. And Frank was fostered as an entrepreneur. And I think Tom touched on it also, saying a lot of times the final decision gets made on where a company wants to locate is where does the boss want to sit? You know, where does he want to live? I mean, is a piece of the economic development thing to create a quality of life that's going to want to attract bosses or is going to foster entrepreneurs?
It's a little bit of all of the above. I own a business here in town. And quite honestly, why I own a business in Connecticut is beyond me because, admittedly, Connecticut is not a very business-friendly state. What do we have to offer? I mean, Naugatuck has a lot to offer. I mean, it is still a small town community feel. This is one of the best communities in the state as far as I'm concerned. What do we need to do to attract the right kind of people, the right CEOs to come in here and move their corporations here? We need to make our school system the best that it can be. One of the ways that we can do that, though, is we need to grow our grant list so that we have the money to invest in education because we don't have that right now. The biggest thing for anybody to attract to Naugatuck is to grow the grant list so we have the money for things like, we have affordable housing, we have nice houses that are affordable in a very nice suburban setting. You've got, huge community pride throughout the town of Naugatuck. You've got multi-generational families here, as well as people that have moved in from outside who become multi-generational families because it is such a strong community. That's what we have to offer. But by bringing in other businesses and growing our brand list will allow us to offer the other amenities that are necessary to attract even bigger businesses. The biggest problem, we've been focusing our conversation here in the last few minutes about downtown and downtown redevelopment. We're not going to bring a large corporation to downtown Naugatuck. That's not going to happen.
That's not true. I got the guy I'm bringing to office complexes. It's not true, Jay.
Okay, as long as there's apartments up above, we'll talk about that. The point is,
I've just been fired.
the point is that one of the challenges that we have as a community, we do not have enough industrial space in the town of Naugatuck to support the inquiries that we get at the NEDC on a daily and weekly basis. That's one of the driving forces behind the zoning modifications to the industrial park so that we could subdivide these large parcels of land so that other companies, private owners can sell off these 2 and 3 acre parcels to get other businesses in there. The other thing is, the only other piece of large property that we have to build something is the old Peter Paul site, which has been rezoned as commercial, against my better judgment, but I had nothing to do with it. But it was zoned as commercial because that is Route 63 New Haven Road is turning into a commercial corridor.
May I stop you again? That piece, the reason that piece is still sitting there is they want too much for it. And as I told you in my speech, you got lots of people that own property that gum up the works because they want way more than it's worth. So it's really not the town's fault at all that the Peter Paul site isn't gone. Carry on, sir.
Well, and that goes back to the mayor's comment, though. And many people say to me, they say to David, they say to the mayor, why aren't you putting something on that Peter Paul property? Well, because I don't know. I would love to put something on the Peter Paul property, but I can't because it's privately owned, and as far as I know, in this nation, we are still a free market and we are still a democracy up to a point. And you can't tell somebody what they can or can't put on their land. And it's their land, they can do what they want. They were successful in changing the zoning, so it is now a commercial property, and at some point, a commercial investor will come in and build something there. But Naugatuck as a whole does not have a lot of inventory of commercial and industrial sites to build the next big thing. We've got the old Unoil Chemical Ventura site, which there's lots of land there, but it has its share of challenges because of environmental issues. At some point in the future, I would hope that that gets developed into another industrial type park, but that's, way down the road before we're going to get there.
What's happening to the Riston property?
Again, the Riston property is not owned by the town of Naugatuck. We have had discussions with one of the principals there about what potentially may or may not happen there, but nothing that's concrete and nothing, again, we don't own it. We can't say you have to do thus and so. And again, they're dealing with the economy just like everybody else. They was bought with an intention. It just hasn't developed yet. And I'm sure at some point in time something will happen there, just a question of.
They need to cooperate with Mr. Prendergast, and then they can get that fixed. And take the right price.
Well,
Go ahead.
one more thing. How long is hopefully this new development impact Church Street? And Church Street is our Church Street, and I cry sometimes when I look at it. And I think, can't these landlords that own the buildings on Church Street, and someone sends them to do something different, buy something?
I think I was going to say, and I may be saying the same thing that the mayor was going to say, is that when new development occurs and new blood is brought in and things start to grow and change and prosper, just by osmosis almost, you're going to see Church Street change. You're going to see the property values of Church Street will increase. If you get the right kind of development in the other areas that are not developed now, the property values on Church Street are going to increase so that you'll see less of the storefront churches that are there because it's cheap rent, as opposed to people that want to move in because they've got foot traffic and they want to build the next boutique or the next florist shop or the next whatever it is, diner, what have you, because there's foot traffic, and then you will see that happen. And I think you will see growth going down Rubber Avenue, and I think you'll see more growth going over the bridge and down Route 63 New Haven Road.
Speaking of, people living in downtown, what are the possibilities of putting apartments on top of some of those big edifices?
Yes, absolutely. No, absolutely. There is, the proposed development, when it was Renaissance Place, had apartments above retail. There were height restrictions just so that we wouldn't change what the skyline of Naugatuck looked like. And there's this distinct possibility that if those types of things are successful, you've got plenty of buildings all along Church Street that could be converted back into apartments and or other types of space. Art space, loft space, all that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, we're going to, one or two more questions and we're going to wrap it up.
I read the other day that the town intends to pursue negotiations to purchase Democratic. What would be your immediate intentions, or obviously there's a lot of remediation that's going to happen?
One of the reason behind the town seizing the opportunity to purchase the General Datacom property is very simple. One of the reasons that Renaissance Place didn't move as quickly as it could have is that we did not have site control. Alex Conroy negotiated in good faith over a number of months with General Datacom prior to 2008-2009 to buy that property. Those negotiations never came to fruition, just didn't happen. A lot of things have changed in the last 5 years, and we are currently in negotiations with them, and we believe that if we can gain control of that property so that we can control our destiny as a town, we would be foolish not to.
Does Tom have any idea what the remediation process is?
We do have an idea. We've had we've gone through phase 3 as well as a site remediation plan. The cost of the remediation is really dependent upon what ends up there. One of the mistakes that we made 3 times with Parcel C, because it was cleaned 3 times, and it really is cleaned now, I swear. Except for the little chained off area where the geese are. No, that's where the parking garage is supposed to be. So anything that was on that site that we didn't have to physically remove because it was going to be encapsulated by a parking garage, and it's all basically coal ash. It's nothing of any significant detrimental type. But what we didn't have on parcel C is we didn't have a site plan. What we are not going to do with parcels A and B, assuming we gain control of those, or when somebody else purchases those, the fact is that in order to clean that site, it's going to take local, state, and federal dollars to do it. It's the only way that's going to happen. There's no private developer that's going to come in and spend the dollars on his own or her own in order to clean that site. So we need to have a site plan of what's going to go there. And knowing what's going to go there, we will then know how to remediate the site, what needs to be removed, what can be encapsulated in a safe fashion according to today's standards, and then go forward. I mean, when they put that parking lot there, they literally plowed, I mean, they knocked down the buildings, they plowed everything into the ground, and they put asphalt on top.
I remember.
Yeah, well, there's a big sinkhole in the middle of the parking lot that happened to be the machine shop for the footwear division 100 years ago, or less, even 40 years ago. Because, if you look at the map and you see where that sinkhole is, and that's the foundation, they just plowed it in. And the wood is broken down, and other things are broken down, and it's just slowly collapsing on itself. So that stuff has to be removed just to make it a buildable site, never mind anything else. But I can't give you an absolute answer as to what the cost for remediation is, because I don't know what we're going to build. Once we know what's going to build there, then we'll have a handle on what it is.
I know, I'm just looking, if I were an investor and I was looking to buy a Jeep, and don't pay $10 million for the purchase. I mean, kind of sense to tell me, I have some idea of the remediation.
Oh, no, we know what the range of mediation costs are. We just can't tell you until we decide what's going to build there. We know the minimum amount, we know the maximum amount, and it's going to be someplace in between. I don't know if the mayor wants to
I
comment.
think the key to the remediation is going to be the partnership with state and federal sources. But if we go right now and say, give us a blank check to clean that, the first question when you're asking for economic development dollars is, how many jobs are you creating, and what's the tax revenue that's going to be generated? So that conversation takes place in a more receptive environment when you can leverage the private investment, what's going to be redeveloped there, with the funds needed to clean it. And then it's all done, as Jay said, in conjunction with a site plan that makes sense. So you're not just taking 4 feet of old dirt, taking it to a site, paying for it to be disposed, and bringing 4 feet new in, when you don't have to do that under modern remediation standards. You don't look convinced.
I'm just seeing my tax dollars go over here,
What I'm seeing on that site,
I understand this town, Rob. It is for generations, I don't know if you know this,
yeah.
you're not keeping the younger generations here anymore. There's nothing here for them.
But that's exactly, I think, the point Jay and I are hitting on is, because I see myself waking up, at 41 and being 60, and still driving downtown and looking at that site vacant. Because the complexities of it are so, the cost formula that Mark talked about, it just doesn't work. And without bold action by the public sector, you're not going to get an incentive in the private sector to make the profit, to do the profit portion of that. And is there a chance that someone comes in and has big bucks and can do the remediation and do the purchase? Yeah, but it's not likely in this economy. I think you're going to have to take some action to initiate that process so that we're not looking at that same site, which it hasn't looked any the same since I graduated high school. That was 23 years ago. You have a building underdeveloped, underutilized, with a large parking lot that could have a much higher and better use.
Right.
But I hear what you're saying.
Okay, do we have any other questions at this point? I'd like to thank you all for coming this evening, and if you do have questions going forward in the future, don't hesitate to call myself or Dave. I don't know if you want to find Mark, he hides someplace up in the middle of nowhere or something.
Bart Hempstead.
Bart Hempstead is kind of the middle of nowhere, isn't it?
It may not be the end of the earth, but you can see it from down.
So, thank you all for coming, I appreciate it.